Greetings and salutations. Welcome to a video about audio. Today we're going to talk about this nifty little cheap DVD player that does a very good job of being a standalone CD player. If a search brought you to this video because you actually wanted to know about the video performance of this DVD player, I really can't tell you much because I have not plugged this into a TV. I have no idea what the video output looks like, nor have I put a DVD in it at all, so I cannot speak to its quality as a DVD player proper. However, I can say that if you are in the market to buy a DVD player, I would pay the extra couple of dollars here to get the upgrade. So the one we're talking about today is the DVPSR210P DVD player by Sony, which right now on Amazon is going for $33. They have a better version of this that has an upscaling HDMI output, which would probably work better with most modern televisions. And that would be the one that I would buy if I was actually buying this to be a DVD player. But for my use case, I don't need a DVD player at the moment. I'm using it purely to play CDs. Why would one want to do such a thing? Well, because CD players are expensive. And if you happen to own a very nice DAC, digital to audio converter, and you just want some way to play CDs, this is a very inexpensive option. You take the coaxial digital output from this little DVD player and you plug it into your DAC, and then you get really good sound for not much money. So if you were starting from scratch and you got yourself a nice little DAC and a nice little amplifier and a set of speakers and maybe some headphones, and you had this DVD player, you're in business. You can start playing CDs. You can play physical media. So this is a very low-cost option. I have to be totally honest, I'm not the first person on YouTube to come up with this idea. I've actually seen two other videos where people talk about this machine or one close to it working in this capacity. Mainly the one that got my attention was Cheap Audio Man. He did a video about this machine and explained its operation with a DAC. It was kind of asinine though, because throughout the video he was dangling the machine by its power cord, which, generally I like his videos, but sometimes he's a little melodramatic. And I saw another video talking about this machine, or one very similar to it in the same capacity. The reviewers, Cheap Audio Man included, all said that the analog output from this machine was bad and it sounded horrible. They were exaggerating. The analog output from this machine is acceptable. Is it great? No. Is it non-listenable? Absolutely not. It's okay. You're going to get better performance if you plug this thing into a high-resolution DAC. We all know this, and that's the point here. I would not recommend buying this machine as a standalone CD player unless you were planning on using the digital output to plug it into some sort of a DAC. In my case, I'm using the input of my Tascam CDRW 900 Mark II CD recorder, which has an AKM DAC in it that is not only a digital to audio converter, but it's also an analog to digital converter. So it's an ADS, I guess that's what you'd call that, an ADG, whatever. And that is a very nice 24-bit DAC in that machine, and what I have been doing, and you can just see it in this picture here, is taking my 5-disc Sony CD changer and sending audio from that using the Toslink fiber optic output and putting that into that machine, and that's how I've been listening to CDs a lot. Now you may ask yourself, doesn't the CD recorder have a CD slot in it? Yes, it does. It has a very nice CD slot in it, and it has the ability to do things like play discs that are challenging to play at double speed, so it can go back and read it twice to make sure that it does double error correction. It'll do all kinds of stuff. It's a great CD player. I'm just trying to keep the hours off of that machine because they cost about $500. So the idea here is to have a cheap machine that I can use to play CDs on a daily basis and not worry about wearing it out. My Sony 5-disc changer, well, that's at least 20 years old at this point. It is a vintage machine in the true definition of the word. Isn't vintage 20 years or older? I think it is, right? Or does that just go for cars? I know an antique car is 25 years or older, right? 25? Anyway, you get the point. It's a relatively old machine. And the Sony CD changer, just like all of those that I remember, I had about 3 of those back in the day. They were all kind of sensitive to certain CDs. They would come across a disc that for some reason it would skip on or it wouldn't like to play, and there would be no reason for it. That same disc would work fine in every other machine, but not in those machines. Well, this machine, my Sony 5-disc player, has the same symptoms that a lot of Sony CD players have, to tell you the truth. The DVD player here, I guess we'll call it the 210 for short, has performed admirably playing CDs, and I have played a whole lot of CDs since I got it last Monday. And I have been doing this project where I'm going through my CD collection, and I am just playing snippets off of the discs just to see how they sound on the new equipment. It is kind of neat to hear how a high-resolution DAC handles early CDs, and I have a lot of early CDs from the 80s and early 90s, and back in those days we had 16-bit DACs, and I had an 8 times oversampling CD player by probably 91 or 92. I had a JVC, which was pretty good, but my first CD player was made by Multitech, and it was just pretty much one of those standard resistor ladder DACs, and it had the phase error and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of interesting to go back now and play these discs in high resolution with a pair of headphones on and really hear what's there. Now, I have to admit that my ears are not what they were back in the 80s when I was a teenager, but they're good enough now that I can hear the resolution. I can hear how the cymbals ring longer, and it's very nice indeed. So I'm finding this to be a fun pastime. For those of you who found this video and have not seen the videos before it, about a year or so ago I got into this thing where I started getting very interested in CDs again, and I went through my entire collection and I made sure that they were all clean and figured out what I wanted to keep and what I wanted to give away and all that stuff. And since then I've just kind of been playing through the collection. I want to hear it, and I through the years have collected thousands of CDs. I started collecting CDs in 1984. So that's been many, many years ago. So, is this a good idea? Well, sure, it's $30. If you already have the DAC, go ahead. Knock yourself out. It's a fun little toy to play with. Like I said, I have no idea what it does for a DVD player, and it does some interesting things. Let me show you this. This is the remote. Sony is good at remotes. And we'll start from the top. This particular remote you can use in conjunction with a TV. This will actually, if you put the right code in, become a remote for your TV as well, which is kind of a nice feature, but you don't have to use it that way if you don't want to. And over here on the top left, you'll see that we have the open close. This is for the DVD. That works nicely. And then there's the power on and off for the DVD. And we have the TV button. This doesn't do anything in the CD mode. And we have TV power on and off. The numbers are nice because you can just type in the track that you want. You put the disc in, allow the machine to read the TOC, and if you want to go to track 13, you put in 1-3, and then you hit the little plus button or the go button or whatever you call that between all the arrow keys. It'll go straight to it. While the machine is playing, it will also do the same thing. You just put in the track number that you want, and it's very logical. If, like I said, if you want 2, you put in 2. You don't put 02, you just put 2. And if it's something that is above 0 through 9, then you'll just put in, 10, 11, 22, 46, depending on how many tracks you have on your CD. You can have 99 tracks on a CD. The audio button does something interesting when you're playing back CDs. It's kind of a party trick this machine has, in that if you press it once, it will switch over to the left channel only. So left channel audio will appear in both left and right, giving you dual mono. So it's not like when you hit it, it's just left channel and the right channel is silent. No, it will become a mono signal, but it'll just be left channel. If you hit it again, it'll switch to right, and then you can hear what's going on in the right channel, and then if you hit it again, it'll go back to stereo. I kind of wish they had a mono mix down in there too. That would be interesting, and it would be useful because a lot of times I'm screening things to put on the radio, and the mono mix is important for things that go on the radio. I'm looking for phase error on the original tape that would cause weirdness in the high frequency sound. I'm looking for stuff like that. And it would be kind of neat to be able to put the thing in mono, but I don't think that they're thinking that way. I think what they're thinking about is just if you, for some reason, have audio that has, let's say, one language in one channel and one language in another, I guess. I'm not sure exactly why this does that, especially with a CD. It makes more sense with a DVD, but it does do it. And if we scroll down here on our picture of our remote, come down here, and this is the real meat and potatoes of what you use with the CD player, because you use the play and you will use the stop and the pause. They do exactly what you think they do. And then we have previous and next, and you can skip tracks that way. These keys don't do anything right here, the ones that they say replay and advance. They don't do anything during playback during a CD, but these keys next to play are how you would search within a track, and they actually work quite well. And one of the things I like about it is that if you push the button, you don't have to hold it. You push it, and it searches until you hit play again. And so that's kind of useful if you're looking around in a long track for a certain section. So as a CD player, this thing is really very cool. I was very impressed with its abilities. Here are the outputs on the back, and this picture comes directly from the Amazon webpage, where they put down here, no HDMI. I didn't do that. They did it. And I guess that's because they've probably had a lot of returns on this machine, because as you can see, we have a lovely composite video out, and, well, it says video out, and then it says composite video out. So then I guess that's progressive there, so you can do RGB. If I'm getting that wrong, I'm sorry. I'm not that tuned in to how analog video worked. I mean, I know that you have 3 cables for a better quality composite, and then video out is just the... I'm getting confused, actually, because when you say composite video, I think of it all going down one cable. Anyway, you get the idea. It can do both. And in the box, they provide you with an audio cable that has a video cable with it, so you could plug it into something that had a simple video input there. But that coaxial digital out is what makes this do its magic, and that is that it just takes the digital audio and then sends it directly into a DAC or whatever you're plugging it into, a preamp, or in my case, a CD recorder that I'm using as a DAC. That's really where the magic happens, and then you have the analog audio output. And once again, let me state that it is not as bad as the audiophile guys make it sound. I notice a difference, and I have it set up on my system where I can switch back and forth. Super easy. I have the analog outputs plugged in and the digital, so I can sit there with the remote for my Sony receiver, and I can switch between the output from the Tascam and then switch to the Sony DVD player as CD player the analog output. And what I hear mainly is just a loss of detail, and the stereo imaging isn't as good coming out of the analog jacks on the back of the DVD player. But if that's all you got, it's listenable. It's okay. I mean, if you think of the quality of, let's say, a cheap portable machine, that's kind of what you're going to get, right? And that's probably not due to the DAC in this machine. I would bet that Sony has put a pretty good DAC in this player, but it probably has more to do with the cheap op amps and on the output that's feeding the analog audio out, is that's where they've cheaped out. When they get to that amplifier section, there's not a whole lot of thought been put into that. So there you go. A very interesting machine, and the remote stuff I just found out by poking at. I didn't really read the manual. I just put a disc in and started pushing buttons to find out what the machine would do. And one of the things I liked about the machine, and one of the reasons that I bought the one that didn't have the DVD input, was with a digital output like that, there may be a setup that you have to go through. If you're just using the CD player option, I don't want to have to plug it in. I literally took it out of the box, plugged it into the amplifier, and as I said at the beginning of the video, I have never seen what the video looks like on a screen coming off of this DVD player. However, I may buy the one here that costs a little bit more, that they're selling for $39. I have a Philips DVD player that's really quite nice, and it has the progressive scan video out. It's the composite video. I don't think I'm using that correctly. I'm not sure. Composite to me is one wire, but this one has, when it goes into my TV, I'm using the RGB cables. Right? Is that RGB? Please correct me down in the comments, because this is going to bug me. Your brain just stops working. You turn on a microphone, and things that you can just remember all the time just go flying out of your head. It's the craziest thing. People sometimes will comment if you make a verbal error. You say one thing and you mean another in a video, which happens all the time. And I just tell them, hey, why don't you try this? It's not as easy as it looks. It's like being on a game show. You can sit in your living room and watch people on a game show and go, man, I can't believe you didn't get that. What a simple answer that is. Have you ever been on a television set? You know, like a set like that? There's lots of bright lights and there's cameras pointing at you and there's an audience there. I couldn't think. I've been on television. I didn't like it. So I guess that's about as much as we're going to talk about this lovely DVD player. But as you saw in the title for this video and the description, we're going to do a little Q&A session. I have a couple of comments that came in from the last couple of videos I posted, and I figured I would take some time to answer those. So that is going to be the part 2 of this video. Well, I can't believe I've made it this far, because I've been operating this setup there that I have on my computer, doing a screencast, with this terrible little USB chiclet style keyboard. It's like a keyboard from one of those little netbook laptops that you can plug in with a USB. My main keyboard died today. When I sat down in front of the computer, this was earlier today, it's the middle of the night now when I'm doing this, I sat down at the computer and I woke the computer up and it just wasn't there. It was like, I'm not going to work. And I was like, what's going on? And it turned out to be the keyboard. The keyboard just died. And so I have ordered a nice big full-sized PS2 keyboard, which should be here in the next few days. But until then, I'm using this little weird chiclet style laptop keyboard with a USB stick on it. Not a USB stick, but a USB plug that you plug into the computer. I wish it did have a USB stick in it. That would make it really interesting, wouldn't it? It's a keyboard and a thumb drive all at the same time. Anyway, this thing came with my son's computer. I bought him a computer a few months back, and the refurbishers that I bought it from sent this horrible little keyboard. But anyway, I figured we'd do a little Q&A here at the end of this video, And these are a few questions that I gathered from comments on the last two videos. One video was about setting anti-skate on your turntable, and the other video that I posted was a 7-year update on my Orbit turntable by U-Turn Audio, and I posted those videos about 30 seconds apart last week. I wanted to see what would happen if I posted two videos and see whether that helped increase the views a little bit, and I can't really tell. It seems to have actually split the views that I would ordinarily get for one video, so I don't know whether that's a good strategy or not. So that's why we're not doing two separate videos this week. I could do a Q&A, and I could have done one about the DVD player, but who cares? If you're interested in the channel, then you'll watch the Q&A, and the people that were just interested in the DVD player, they'll just bail. So either way, everybody wins. So let's jump into it here. The first question that I have is from Oil Jeep. And this was one that came up on the anti-skate video. It said, "Hey Joe, what was the RT85 doing that made you look for answers? I own the RT85N. I am curious." I'm sure he meant to say, "and I am curious." And he's talking about a Fluence RT85, which is their top-of-the-line turntable. And they have two models. The N means that it has a Nagalka MP110 cartridge on it. And I bought, my turntable was an N, but my Nagalka cartridge turned out to be bad, so I ended up sending that back, and I've tried all kinds of different cartridges on that turntable since. So the problem with that turntable was with the anti-skate. What happened is I was setting up that turntable, I guess about 2 weeks ago, and it appeared to be working properly, and I was setting the anti-skate on that turntable using the method that I showed in the video, and it looked like it was okay. And then I kind of noticed that it was off. The scale on the anti-skate dial was reading higher than usual to get the same result, and I thought, well, that's interesting. So that's what made me go look. And then when I went back to redo the video, I found out that the anti-skate mechanism in that turntable was not working at all. It just stopped. I could turn it all the way up, and it wouldn't do anything. So that means that one of two things have happened with that turntable. Either the anti-skate spring has broken, popped off, and it's not working at all, or it has become so weak that it's now stretched and it doesn't work. And when I looked up anti-skate connected to the RT85, I found that this was a common problem with those turntables. And some people ended up getting their turntable replaced because of that problem. So apparently the folks that actually build the tone arms are using bad springs, which is kind of sad because I really like that turntable. And at some point I will probably try and open it up and see if I can see what's going on, because if it's a matter of just the spring popping off, that might be really easy to fix. If not, then there's not a whole lot that I can do with it. And as far as contacting Fluence is concerned, I don't know whether they'll honor any sort of warranty at this point. I've had that machine for a long time and kind of got my money's worth out of it. I actually ended up paying less for that machine than $500, which is the street price, or it was at the time that I bought it, because I ended up sending the cartridge back and they refunded me the money for the cartridge. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it, to tell you the truth. We'll see. If that's something that I end up getting into, I will do a video about it. I'll let you know what I come up with. But I'm kind of leaning toward probably selling that machine at this point, because I don't know, there's some other things about it that I'm not real thrilled with. The RT85 is a very live turntable. They had the bright idea of putting it on rubber feet that had springs in it, which means that if you touch that machine, it makes a doing sound. It's very low frequency, but it's there. And the springs really don't do a lot to absorb things like footfalls. My dual CS618Q direct drive turntable has sorbethane feet on it. And that does a much better version of isolating the turntable from footfalls and things like that. And so I may just go with that one as my main turntable. And I'm actually really enjoying using my old Orbit, which was the reason why I did the video about the Orbit anyway. I don't know. We'll see. It's not a high priority at this point. And that kind of bleeds into my next question here. And this comes from Cassette Decks and Turntables. And this was actually a discussion that I ended up having with this person online. He says, I like your videos and your channel, but I have a question. Why don't you buy some good vintage turntables, service it, and see if you like it? You mostly buy new turntables with their price-quality ratio. It's not ideal. Well, first of all, I have been there and done that. And some of you may remember, if you've been watching this channel since 2008, that that's exactly what I did years ago. This channel started out with me going on eBay and buying cassette decks and then turntables and fixing them up and doing a video about them. And I have been doing that on this channel for probably, I've been doing it since 2008, but I've been doing that throughout the years, and I've probably posted about 20 or 25 turntables that I have had. Where are those turntables now? I either sold them or gave them away, because I would get them and play with them for a while, and then something else would come along, and then I would have to move them out the door. The last 5 years or so, the videos that I have posted have been exclusively about new turntables. I really haven't bought a bunch of old turntables, with the exception of a lovely Technics turntable that was all electronic, beautiful automatic turntable with a P-mount cartridge, P-mount tone arm, T4P arm on it. That turntable, my sister now has it. I gave it to her. And so I made a conscious decision a few years back that I wasn't going to buy junk anymore, because I kept getting screwed. I kept getting things that I couldn't fix. I kept getting things that weren't as great as they were billed to be, or I thought they were. And it's a big waste of money. Years ago, when this channel made a lot of money, which it does not do anymore, that was not a big deal. I could write that off as an expense. I could say, this is a prop, and I'm making a video, and I'm making money on the video, so this was how I justified it. When YouTube changed how they pay their creators and their algorithms several years ago, the money on this channel went away. I don't make a great deal of money on this channel, and I don't get a whole lot of views these days. And the channel became more in Linux centered anyway. So I made a decision that I wasn't really going to do that. Now, the last year, I have to admit, you've not seen any of them except for one. I bought a whole bunch of CD players, gang. Probably 5 or 6. And all of them arrived broken or barely working. I did post a video a few weeks back about an Emerson CD player, and that one generally works, but it's 40 years old, and the logic is weird, and sometimes you'll be playing a disc and it'll just skip for no reason. That's not because there's anything wrong with the machine. It's because that's the way those machines were. It's a machine from 1985. That's what they did. And so that machine has now pretty much become a shelf queen. I took that and unplugged it, and I bought this Sony machine, which works perfectly, which is exactly what I expected. The Sony machine's $30, by the way. If it breaks, it breaks. Anyway, I'm getting a little sidetracked. But before that, I bought a whole bunch of CD players that you never saw, just out of curiosity. And I was trying to fix them, and I could not fix any one of them. because this guy's talking about servicing turntables and things like that, and I've done it. To do that sort of thing requires tools, time, and patience. I have some of the tools, but not all of them. Like, for instance, I don't have a soldering iron at this point, and I don't have the vision to solder anymore. I have not soldered in so many years just because I can't see well enough to do it. And if I'm soldering really large wires, like battery terminals, I could probably get away with it, but actually doing soldering on some sort of circuit board, forget it. It's not going to happen. So I don't do that sort of thing, and I don't really have the time to sit down and commit to rebuild a turntable like he's talking about. Usually takes a whole day of concentrated effort, and then you have to find parts and you have to figure this out and all this other stuff, and I'm just not there. I just don't have that kind of patience anymore. So, and I don't really have a place to do it either. I have a music room, but I don't have like a workbench to work on. I don't have a designated work area like that. So I've moved away from doing those things. Many years ago, I had the space, I had the time. I was going through a midlife crisis, actually, when I started this channel, to tell you the truth. And I had found this community of people that were doing this. They were getting the old tape decks, getting the old turntables, and they were working on them. And I was fascinated with that because I grew up that way. My dad was a tinkerer, and part of the reason why I do videos about audio equipment and I'm fascinated with it is that we had a steady stream of it. We had record players, radios, televisions constantly going through our house because my dad could not resist picking them up. And he wasn't an expert, but he could change a tube. And yes, back in those days, things had tubes in them. And he knew how to change a Phono cartridge. I remember one time he went to a yard sale or flea market somewhere and brought home this absolutely gorgeous Emerson record player radio combination from 1956. Beautiful thing. I saw one restored. A guy was going to sell it restored. And I thought, I'd like to have that. And then I looked at the price, and the dude wanted like $2,000 for it. I'm like, nope. Well, my dad found one of those and swapped out a tube and put a brand new Sonotone cartridge in that thing. And that thing floated around our house for a long time. It had a high-fidelity AM radio in it. It had a wideband AM radio that sounded amazing. We're talking AM radio here. And then you could also play LPs and 45s and 78s on this thing. And it did that very well, too. It had a Sonotone T2 cartridge on it. And those are fantastic. It was a voice of music changer. So that's one of my favorite memories from that particular point in time. So I thought this was normal. I thought everybody just did this. That they constantly went out and bought stuff and did this. And apparently it's not. And of course, these days, you're a real weirdo if you're collecting physical media of any kind. One more thing on this subject, and then I'm going to move on, is that he says here that their price-quality ratio, it's not ideal. I disagree. I think maybe that would have been true 15 years ago. I think now there are a lot of really good turntables on the market. Cassette decks, no. All modern cassette decks are garbage. That's one of the reasons I don't fool with tape decks anymore at all. I don't mess with it because the modern machine in 2014 they stopped licensing Dolby noise reduction. You could not, after that, you cannot buy a cassette deck that has Dolby noise reduction on it. All of the mechanisms, even the higher end ones like the Tascams and the TACs that they sell these days, they have those cheap Chinese transports in them. And so it's just, no, I'm not going there. That's true for cassette decks, but for turntables, absolutely not. Like the other day, I saw this wonderful TAC. I think it's the TAC TD4, or TD4 is in the model number. And I watched about 3 minutes of the video, and I stopped because it has a Sake tone arm on it. And it's a TAC transport or a drive mechanism, and it's direct drive. And the turntable's selling for $750, which I think for a turntable like that is a steal, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I think that the dual turntable that I have, the dual CS618Q, is one of the best turntables that I personally have ever heard play anywhere. And I worked in radio for many years. I've worked with some very nice professional turntables. Gates turntables, the entire Techniques line, the SP10s, SP15s, 25s, usually with gray microtrack tone arms, and of course the 1200 and all those things that people point at and go ooh ah these days. And I can tell you that this dual turntable that I have with their custom arm on it is just amazing. Now, that machine also is a prototype. It's one of the first 100 built of that model, which was hand-built in Germany. This is not... Apparently, after that, the plan was to have it built in China to their specifications. I cannot vouch to the quality of the Chinese versions of those, but I can tell you that this one that I have is just stunningly good. And it's one of the reasons I stopped buying junk turntables. I put out the money for this machine. I paid $1,000 for it. And it is jaw-droppingly good. So I really can't see chasing junk. And the other thing about this is that when you have an old piece of equipment, I don't care what it is, and even if you take it in and have it lovingly serviced, somebody goes through it and they replace all the capacitors and they clean all the switches and the dials and the knobs and everything, the potentiometers in it, and all the stuff that you think about having done when something is serviced and everything is aligned. At the end of the day, you still have a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old piece of equipment. And it's going to break. This is what I have found out from CD players. I've bought a lot of old CD players, guys, out of curiosity. And I can tell you that most of them, even if they were carefully serviced, would work for a while and then they quit. And it usually came down to things like switches and the logic getting funky and stuff like that. It's just because this stuff is really old. And what we really need to do, instead of scrounging the junk, is find things that are good and then vote with our dollars if we're going to have a market out there that we're going to get the machines to be able to play physical media. If this is going to be something that we're going to continue to be into, then we really need to be buying new things. That's the way I feel about it. My next major CD player is going to be the Onkyo 6-disc changer. I think it's the C390 is the... I don't think I've got that right. Anyway, Onkyo has a 6-disc CD changer that is very well respected, very well reviewed, and it sells anywhere between $300 and $350, which is a lot of money. And I think that's the one that if I was going to buy a brand new CD machine, standalone CD player, I'd get that. A lot of the other ones I look at, I'm suspicious of. Not because the electronics are bad, or I know they're going to come with a good DAC, and I know that's not going to be an issue. It's the transports that bug me. Because it seems to me that people will slap a big price on a CD player these days, and then when you get it, you've got a cheap plastic Chinese transport, and the machine will work for about a year, and then it'll start skipping and screwing up, and then there you are, you're stuck. I mean, go to like Amazon.com and look for component CD player, and you'll see the Denons and all of the Pioneer has one out, and Onkyo has several, and the displays all look the same because it's the same electronics, and they're all coming from the same Chinese factory. So that makes me wonder about the transport in the machine. Just something to think about. Before I moved on to the next question, this stack of junk that you see is what went out of here right after the first of the year, I decided that I was going to get rid of a lot of things that have been hanging around here. This stuff has been in closets and stuck in under beds and in corners, and this is stuff that I have done videos about through the years, and for whatever reason, it doesn't work anymore, or it barely works. So you'll see that one of the things that did go out was the TIAC cassette deck CD combination, and that one kind of broke my heart, but it had gotten to a point where the cassette deck needed servicing, the CD door wasn't working properly, and I just didn't want to fool with it anymore. So before anybody freaks out, this did not just go into a landfill somewhere. There is a local fella right around the corner from me who was starting up his own electronics shop, and I happened to come upon it on the internet, and I gave him a call, and I said, hey, he just had put this, there's a little blurb on the internet when you look for electronics recycling, and he had this little repair shop that he was starting, and I called him up, and I said, look, I've got a whole stack of stuff, would you like to have it? And the guy said, yeah. And I said, okay. And he brought a van around and picked all this up. And I said, look, if you can get a capacitor out of it, great. And he was just tickled to have it. So there's a big lot of stuff here. There's one of those Crosley all-in-one stereo units there. There's a couple of computers. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 CD players. So, yeah. I told you I bought a lot of CD players. You didn't believe me, did you? Yes, I know I was rather long-winded with that last question, but I had a lot to say on the subject. So thank you, cassette decks and turntables, for your input. It is much appreciated, and the best of luck to you with your cassette decks and turntables and your YouTube channel. So I did the video about anti-skate, and somebody asked, does an S8-shaped tone arm behave any differently, or do the same facts apply? Yes, absolutely. The shape of the tone arm makes no difference. If you are setting anti-skate, you do it the same way. It's the same method. And I was just waiting for people to come out of the woodwork on that video and tell me that I was an idiot. And I think the second comment that I got, or the first comment, was one that was rather long-winded about, God bless you, Ashley, but no, you can't sit there and actually look at the cantilever on the cartridge while it tracks to try and determine anti-skate. Nobody can see that, dude. It's like, no. And I don't think that's a good method anyway, because even if you did set it, that it would be like for one record. You can go read that comment. I think it was well-meaning, but there's a lot of different opinions out there about anti-skate and how to achieve the best value, and I kind of knew that was coming. So, but fortunately, most people have been very nice, and I've gotten some nice comments on that. So, and nobody, like I said, nobody's been nasty, which is good. Finally, the last question here is, it said, I'm having a hard time with some folks saying $189 is being cheap. I guess if one has money to burn, then it probably is. But are we talking about cheap price or cheap made? This was a question that appeared on a video that I posted a while back concerning a gold ring phono cartridge. The gold ring cartridges, which are based on the Audio-Technica bodies, and then they rev them up, they're pretty cool cartridges, and they actually sound really good. And I'm going to answer this question, but before I get to it, I just want to give you a little follow-up on that video. I went to go buy a stylus for that cartridge because the one that is on it doesn't sound that great, and I think it probably has a little bit of wear on it. I did use that cartridge for quite a while. So I went to buy a new one, and I found out that in the United States, the styli for those gold ring cartridges are very expensive compared to like the same grade of stylus that you would buy for an Audio-Technica AT VM95E or whatever. And they're not interchangeable. You can't take, even though it's the same body, you can't take a VM95 stylus and put it on the gold ring cartridge, because if you try and do that, it won't fit. I tried it. I know. So I thought maybe I could get away with that, but it didn't work. So that cartridge is in storage right now. And the $189 at that time, I think what I was asking, was it worth upgrading to the, I think it's the Q3, the Q4. Let me go look that up. I found it pretty quickly. I'm talking about the Gold Ring E3 moving magnet cartridge. It seems that the price has not changed since I put the video up, which is $189. They have an E4, which features a nude stylus that I believe adds $100 to the price, and I know that at one point I posted a video asking whether it was actually worth the money to buy the E4 over the E3. Did it really make that much difference? Because the nude stylus for that was 0.3 by 0.7, just like the bonded elliptical, which is what comes with the E3, and that was a 0.3 by 0.7 as well. It was pointed out to me, by the way, later that not only did the stylus change, but the specifications from the E4 and the E3 bodies were slightly different. And I think I had not done the comparison, so the E4 is probably definitely an upgrade. But yeah, I wanted to make sure I was talking about the right cartridge, because I was trying to do it from memory and I couldn't, and that's how that works. Like I said, once you turn a microphone on, you have no idea what you're talking about. It's like all facts and things that you're very sure of become very unsteady in your mind, or they just go away. Poof. So $189 is not an insignificant amount of money. But in the world of cartridges, this is somewhat low end. They have Phono cartridges that you could buy for $50, $60. I know that. You can get an OM5E for $50 or $60. You can get an Audio-Technica VM95E. What is that, $50, $60, something like that. And what you get is $50, $60 worth of performance out of those cartridges. They're okay, and they track pretty well on most records, but then if you throw anything at it with a lot of modulation, high velocity on it, then they start to break up. You'll start to hear sibilance, distortion. I've noticed that with a bonded elliptical from Audio-Technica, that's going to ensure that you're going to have a pretty high degree of inner groove distortion. And if your ears are not sensitive to that, then it's probably fine for you to do that. The OM5E is pretty much the same way. That's a nice sounding cartridge, but if you hit it with something that has a lot of high frequency energy on it, then you're going to hear sibilance, and maybe it's slightly better at dealing with inner groove distortion. A good general everyday player, but we're not talking about super high fidelity audiophile grade stuff. Magic things happen with Audio-Technica based cartridges when you start putting nude styli on them. You go from where you can obviously hear mistracking and distortion because of the mass of the tip of the stylus, having a hard time tracing the groove, to suddenly that just goes poof and it goes away. And I'm assuming that it would be the same for the Gold Ring E3 moving magnet cartridge. Still, for this kind of price for this cartridge, this has a very refined sound. The Gold Ring cartridges, I think, are worth the extra money because of the fact that they really tune them up. You have to remember that Audio-Technica is able to put cartridges out at the prices that they put out because they're doing mass-produced. They're making millions of them. They make millions of them and stockpile them until they decide they're going to change the model. And so, for good or bad, that's the way they do it. And they have basically they have three body styles that they produce. these days. Well, 4 if you count the P-mount cartridges, but I don't think they're making any new P-mount cartridges. I think they're selling the stock that they have. So what you have is the VM series. You can have the VM95 series of cartridges, which replaced the AT95E, which was a fantastic cartridge, by the way. I miss the AT95E. You see them come up every now and again, and you just can't get the good styli for those anymore. The original AT95E with the 0.7 by 0.4 elliptical stylus, it's called a fat elliptical. I loved the way that thing sounded. Oh, it tracked so well. And then they changed over to a 0.3 by 0.7, and that's when we started to get that typical Audio-Technica bonded stylized sound where it's it's great. It's a 0.3 by 0.7. It tracks the groove nicely, and it's supposed to pick up all the high frequencies. But the mass at the tip is just too much, and it counteracts the trackability of the cartridge. So, yes, this is one of the reasons I moved away from Audio-Technica. Audio-Technica, in general, has become I kind of worked my way through the entire line of Audio-Technica cartridges, from the VM95C all the way up to the 500 series. See, I'm blanking out again on something that I should know very easily. And the 500 series, where it starts out with the 510, which is the conical, and then it goes all the way up to a Shibata, which is the 540 is where I stopped, and that's with the microline. I did not get a Shibata, and I'm not buying a 740 because I think $350 for a cartridge, just because it has an aluminum body, is a bit much to pay. That's getting out of my price range. So, anyhow, wandering around, meandering, talking about Audio-Technica. This is why I went to Stanton's, boys and girls. I'm running Stanton cartridges, and I'm going to stick with them for a while. I don't really like the crop of cartridges that are out there these days. And anyhow, getting back to the original question about cheap and money and all that stuff. This is, $189 is a lot of money to spend for anything that you're doing for just entertainment. And I don't know. Like I said, it depends on how much quality you demand from what you... If you're just looking for something to play records, you could get one of those Riga P1 turntables that have the carbon cartridge on it, which is actually nothing more than an AT3600 cartridge with a rebranded... I think the only thing they do to that cartridge is put a stylus on it that says carbon on it instead of just the little AT symbol. Anyway, those turntables are under $500, and they're extraordinarily simple, and they sound pretty decent. They're easy to maintain. Styli are easy to get. There's no adjustments on them. They come pre-adjusted from the factory. You could get one of those and just play it. And once you made that investment, that would probably last you 5 or 10 years before you would have to redo it. So this is all about chasing a sound and trying to find something that sounds good to your ears. My personal opinion on it is that I'm not going to pay any more for a Phono cartridge than its weight in gold. And I have to say that I'm not the person who came up with that. I heard somebody else say that on YouTube at one point, and it clicked with me, and I went, yeah, you're right. Because there are, people who pay $700, $800, $900 for a Phono cartridge to play records that they bought for $1 at the flea market and cleaned in their spin clean. And if that's what makes you happy, that's great. But I've got to draw a line somewhere. I have champagne taste on a beer budget. So I went back to the old Stanton cartridges. Number one, because every cartridge that I've ever bought, I've compared in my mind to their sound, right? And the other thing is that I just got tired of trying out all of the new cartridges that I listen to. What they can't get is tonal balance right. They're either too bright, or they're too dim, or they have too much bass, or whatever. That's the main thing that they cannot get right these days, is making a truly flat sounding cartridge. The only companies that do that, Ortophone cartridges are very, very minimal, but there's some things about their builds that I don't like. I'm not a big fan of Ortophone Styli in particular, especially the 2M Blue. The 2M Blue, if you have 45s and you have 45s made of styrene, stay away from that thing. It'll eat records. It's just the way it's designed. But sonically, those are very well-balanced cartridges. They're nice. Not as good as the Stantons, but there you go. So I'm just kind of tired of fooling around with that whole thing. And the Audio-Technica, I just want to go back to what I know and what puts a smile on my face. And that's kind of where I'm at these days with Phono cartridges. If I hit alternate F4, that should close this, and we should, yes, okay, we did that right. Just one more comment about money and pricing on this, and then I'm going to shut this down because I have rambled on quite a bit, but I had a lot to say. I made a conscious decision to stop buying the junk because I wasn't getting the money back on the videos. So if I bought something for $100 and I fixed it up and was able to do a video about it, and then I made $100 in ad revenue from that video, it paid for itself. And I had this thing, and I could give it away or sell it or do whatever I want. That money went away. So I stopped doing that. And the other thing is that finding things that are $100 that I want to talk about is very hard these days, because everything that has anything to do with turntables or records, the people on eBay have gotten hip to the fact that this is a cool thing going on. So the prices have gone up. And like, you will see Technics turntables being sold for $200 or $300 or $400 now, that 10 years ago would have sold for $75 or $80. You don't even know what the condition of those turntables are that you're buying. You have no clue. And that, for me, is, first of all, buying a turntable off of eBay is a gamble anyway, because if they don't pack it properly, it's going to arrive broken, right? Because I've had that happen too. So you have to be very careful with that, and you have to trust the seller. So you don't have, like years ago, it was no big deal. It was like, you could find really nice Technics cassette decks that people were selling for $75. CD players were $50. I once bought, it's a beautiful turntable, by the way, a Technics Q300 quartz 300 direct drive turntable, fully automatic, beautiful, with a T4P tone arm on it, and I bought it for $80. It had been used in a church. It was part of a stereo system in a church, and they had never used it, and they sold it, and it arrived. It had a little chip in the lid, which I was able to fix with some super glue. I was able to fix that, and it didn't need a whole lot of work. I just kind of checked it out and dusted it off and put a new cartridge on it. Oh my God, it just sang. It was beautiful. I used that turntable for years. Those days are over. You can't find things like that on eBay anymore. Because, well, first of all, they're not making any new vintage Technics turntables now, are they? And you have a market where, the low-hanging fruit has been sucked up by the people who have gotten back into playing records again. So now, if anything like that comes up, it's just so expensive, it's prohibitive. And even records have become that way. I got burnt so bad. I was buying records and buying them on eBay, but I've heard the same stories about Discogs, is that you go on and you find a record, and somebody says it's in great condition, very good plus, and you get it home, and it's scratched up, or worse yet, the record looks clean, but then it was played on some horrible 1950s record player with a ceramic cartridge with an osmium needle that had never been changed, and so the grooves are all ripped out, and it sounds horrible. And you've paid $10 or $15 for this thing, and you're stuck with it. Now, that doesn't sound like a great deal of money, but I remember when you could get albums on eBay for $4.95 plus shipping, and they would arrive not perfect, but playable. And that's when I first started getting into that. That's kind of where it was. So, yeah, that adds up. And if you, like, I've got probably in the last year buying records, vinyl records, I've had about a 50% success rate that what somebody said I was getting is what I got. And it didn't arrive completely scratched up. Now, there have been a few occasions where I've had some records that were so bad that I went to the seller and I said, hey, I'm not going to put up any negative feedback because I know how bad that is, but this belongs in the trash. This is not what you're advertised. And they give me my money back or whatever. A lot of times I'm not big on getting money back on low price purchases like that because it's a bigger pain in the butt than it's worth. And besides, apparently they need the money more than I do. So a lot of times I don't make a big deal out of it. But yeah, you get burnt like that a few times and that makes you shy. So you say, well, I'm going to buy new records. Okay. New records are $25, $50. I was looking for an NXS album not too long ago. And the record, the LP, the best price that I could find was $67. Where I could get a used CD that was in extremely good condition, which I could verify by looking at a picture of it. I could see that there were no big scratches on the disc, so I'm pretty sure it's going to play. And the guy sold it to me for like $5. All right, I bought the CD. So that's where I have been concentrating in the last couple of years is digital and going back and brushing up on my knowledge of digital audio and getting into the idea of learning how DACs work and a deeper understanding and just really exploring that whole digital world. And that main reason is because I can buy CDs for cheap. That's why you see videos from me about CDs. So there you go. Do I still love records? Absolutely. But I am more careful about buying records these days. And I don't buy them as often because they're expensive. I bought a Stray Cats album not too long ago that is admittedly in very good condition, used condition, and plays very cleanly after a good cleaning. But I spent $15 on this thing. And it certainly wasn't new, and it wasn't in the shrink wrap. So I'm not doing that quite as often as I had done in the past. So that's kind of where I'm at with the whole thing. I mean, I like to go listen to music. I have a very large digital library. I've got the records. I've got the CDs. I'd still have my cassettes, even though I don't have a cassette deck to play them in. I have not let them go. They are in a closet. They are put away. And at some point I'll do something with them, but now I'm not quite ready to let it go because I still get the itch every now and again. And if I come across a Technics cassette deck, I really would like to have one of those nice Technics cassette decks from 78 or 79 that still had the analog meters on them and the EQ was so good and they had a really great Dolby B noise reduction on them. I don't care about Dolby C. Dolby B was what I used mainly on my cassettes. Those machines were gorgeous and wonderful. And of course finding one that's redone is a big pain. I know what I said earlier. It's a 40 or 50-year-old machine and something's bound to break, but that's one I might make an exception for if one pops up at a price that I can swallow. I might get me a cassette deck again. Maybe. We'll see. And then again, a meteor may come out of the sky and squash me flat. So, who knows, right? Thank you for listening to this video. I know it went on for a long time, but I had a lot to say. And if you have listened this long, that means you're a very special kind of viewer. And I super appreciate you being here. And I want to know, if you will, down in the comments, what you thought of this particular video. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, please let me know. I'm thinking about doing more music-based videos where we talk about albums and records. I've done that sporadically in the past with mixed results. But just to have something to put up here, I'm thinking about maybe doing that because I am collecting a lot of music and it would be kind of interesting to talk about it. But I'm not really sure. And finally, for those of you who keep asking about Linux content, when something happens in the Linux community that strikes my fancy and I want to talk about it, I will, but I think I've pretty much covered the Linux subject. I'm still a Linux user and I still am involved in the community, but as far as being a spokesman for Linux and that sort of thing, I don't do that these days. I've just kind of moved on from it. But all the old videos are there, so just go to my channel and check them out. Thank you for watching. Your comments and your suggestions, much appreciated. We'll do it again soon.